Namaste, and welcome to our continuing series on the synthesis of yoga with our beloved Ranga. We are on page 76, the yoga of divine works and self-consecration also. Beginning with the sentence, in the ordinary paths of yoga, the method used for dealing with these conflicting materials is direct and simple.
We read the whole paragraph and then we come back to it. In the ordinary paths of yoga, the method used for dealing with these conflicting materials is direct and simple. One or another of the principal psychological forces in us is selected as our single means for attaining to the divine. The rest is quieted into inertia or left to starve in its smallness. The bhakta, seizing on the emotional forces of the being, the intense activities of the heart, abides concentrated in the love of God, gathered up as into a single one-pointed tongue of fire. He is indifferent to the activities of thought, throws behind him the importunities of the reason, cares nothing for the mind's thirst for knowledge. All the knowledge he needs is his faith and his inspirations that well up from a heart in communion with the divine. He has no use for any will to works that is not turned to the direct worship of the beloved or the service of the temple. The man of knowledge, self-confined by a deliberate choice to the force and activities of discriminative thought, finds release in the mind's hushed inward drawn endeavor. He concentrates on the idea of the self, succeeds by a subtle inner discernment in distinguishing its silent presence amid the wailing activities of nature, and through the perceptive idea arrives at the concrete spiritual experience. He is indifferent to the play of the emotions, deaf to the hunger call of passion, closed to the activities of life. The more blessed he, the sooner they fall away from him and leave him free, still and mute, the eternal non-doer. The body is a stumbling block. The vital functions are his enemies. If their demands can be reduced to a minimum, that is his great good fortune. The endless difficulties that arise from the environing world are dismissed by erecting firmly against them a defense of outer physical and inner spiritual solitude. Safe behind a wall of inner silence, he remains impassive and untouched by the world and by others. To be alone with oneself or alone with the divine, to walk apart with God and his devotees, to entrench oneself in the single self-ward endeavor of the mind or Godward passion of the heart is a trend of these yogas. The problem is solved by the excision of all but the one central difficulty which pursues the one chosen motive force. In the midst of the dividing calls of our nature, the principle of an exclusive concentration comes sovereignly to our rescue. So, biggish para, and he is explaining to us, he is contrasting the normal yogas with the integral yoga. And he used the word ordinary because ordinary in the sense that normally, ordinarily what are used. Because if you say that he is using the word ordinary to describe yoga, then that's a little misinterpretation, I think. Because then it would be like putting them down. But he's not doing that. He says ordinarily the paths of yoga. You have to understand it in that way. Okay?
But I'm finding here what What the Bhakta does is even fuller than the intellectual, than the mental man, because he doesn't mind doing works for the divine.
Yes.
He has that love, he has that will.
You are speaking of the
Bhakta.
Bhakta, yeah. So, yes.
It's
but,
interesting, yes, but.
Yes. No, even the Bhakta avoids too much of physical activity. He concentrates only on the. He is indifferent to the activities of thought, throws behind him the opportunities of the reason, cares nothing for the mind's thirst for knowledge. So he is only his faith and inspirations. So there is a exclusivity in both Jnana Yoga as well as
No
Karma.
doubt. No doubt.
As well as Bhakti Yoga.
Yeah.
In Karma Yoga, there is not much of rejection because you are not rejecting the world. You are only turning all your activities towards the divine. So, let's look. So, in this para, he is describing what the Jnana Yogi does, the one who is looking for the self, and the devotional man who is looking for the love and intimacy of God, with God. So, these are the two things. And we'll look at the words we are saying. In the ordinary paths of yoga, the method used for dealing with these conflicting materials is direct and simple. And what is that? Eliminate all the other things except what you want. Because the divine is very complex. He is not only love, he is also truth, he is also everything. He is even the opposite of truth and the opposite of love. So, he is everything. So, you restrict all other activities and focus only on one. You don't focus on force, you don't focus on bliss, you focus only on knowledge. For the man of knowledge, he wants to go to the self and he wants only that. Other things he ignores. In Srimada's yoga, we don't ignore. We try to get everything together. Not together, but he will tell you how to do it. So, conflicting materials. If you remember, he has told us that we have a mind, we have a heart, we have a body, but we also have an inner mind, inner vital, inner body, and we also have a psychic being, and there is the superconscient planes also which belong to us. We may not have built them yet. There is the inconscient, there is the subconscient. If you compare yourself to a house, it's like you have built your ground floor, but you have not yet built your first floor, which is the self. You have not built your second floor, third floor, fourth floor, which is the higher mind, element mind, element mind. They have to be built. You have to reach there and build them. Then they are available to you. But potentiality of building all these is always there in man. Okay? So he concentrates on the self. So what is the self? Let's repeat so that it's clear again. The self is the Brahmic consciousness, the Brahman consciousness. And what is that? It's a state of utter peace, calm. Your consciousness is settled in that vastness, the infinity, eternal. You know that you are immortal. You always have been and you always will be. And if you are lucky enough, you have a cosmic consciousness. You have become one with everybody else. And even if you don't have the cosmic consciousness, you are in peace. Nothing is affecting you at all. Absolutely calm and quiet. Sense of infinity, sense of release. There can be a little bit of even you can describe it as not Ananda Paras, but a blissful state of peace. Okay. Too much. There is a bliss also which is calm and quiet, and there is a bliss which is intense, which you can describe as ecstasy. There can be horripilation. Your hairs will stand up. There will be excitement. That also is possible. Okay, so here's what he's saying. Conflicting material, that's what we all are. But you eliminate all these things and concentrate only on the self. You imagine the self what it is, a state of calm, pure, reject everything else and concentrate only on that. That's the Jnana Yoga path. The Bhakti Yoga path, you concentrate on the love of the divine and don't bother about knowledge or anything else. I'll go through the sentences. One or another of the principal psychological forces in us as selected as our single means for attaining to the divine. So, in Jnana Yoga, you are taking the resort to the mind. You are silencing your mind, but that's your area of activity. In the Bhakti Yoga, you are concentrating on the heart and you are trying to make that your point of focus. The love for the divine in the heart. So these are the psychological forces, love and knowledge, selected as one single means for attaining to the divine. The rest is quieted into inertia. It is no, you don't bother about it, or left to starve in its smallness. Don't pay any attention to it at all. Okay, interesting words there used. The bhakta, the man of devotion, seizing on the emotional forces of the being, the intense activities of the heart, abides concentrated in the love of God, gathered up as into a single one-pointed tongue of fire. He is indifferent to the activities of thought, throws behind him the importunities of the reason, cares nothing for the mind's thirst for knowledge. The word importunity is insisting on something repeatedly, like a child importunes his mother for something or other.
Exactly.
And goes on pestering her. So you also can do that. Okay, the reason, if you want to understand something and you are really an intellectual, then you will not be satisfied until you find the solution for that. There is a very interesting letter of that, of Amal Kiran to mother. He is telling mother in the letter, Mother, tell me if man has got a free will. Don't give me arguments, because I will counter argue. It's a very complicated question, so don't give me arguments. Just tell me yes or no. So he is telling, I want a solution to this problem. So he is asking for a definite answer. So, importunities of the reason, cares nothing for the mind's thirst for knowledge. All the knowledge he needs is his faith and the inspirations that well up from a heart in communion with the divine. When your heart is in communion with the divine, you can get inspirations and intuitions.
What was Mother's answer?
Pardon?
What was Mother's answer to Amal?
Oh, she said yes.
Ah.
But you have to be identified with your heart. Your soul. So long as you are identified with your body-mind life, you don't have free will. It is universal nature which is making you dance like a puppet. But the moment you realize that you are the soul and not the body-mind life, you realize that the soul has got a power of making its own destiny. So their freedom is there to a certain extent. But not, that's why you call it liberation. You call it salvation. When you are in the body-mind life, no. No liberty at all. It's universal nature that is making you do. So when you go to the self, then you realize that you are not the doer. It is universal nature which is doing things. It is making the tree grow, it is making the river flow, it is making your body grow, it is making your putting thoughts into your mind, all mechanically. And also it is putting emotions into your heart. You are not doing anything. You are not getting angry. Anger is coming into you. You are not becoming jealous. It's coming into you. You are not feeling happy. Happiness is thrust on you. But when you are there, then you realize that this is mechanical and now I have a choice. Then you become the permission giver. Then you have a freedom. But not before that. And even that freedom is partial. The only freedom is at the highest level. The divine is the only one who has got total freedom to do what he wants. As it keeps coming down, we have discussed many times, there is a diminution and a darkening. The subtle becomes gross. Same thing with the free will. The free will is pure and 100% at the higher level. As you keep coming down in the levels of existence, the free will also starts becoming less, until finally you are imprisoned in your body-mind life. That's the truth. So there is free will. but not at the lower levels when you are identified with your body, mind, life. Okay, so he has no use for any will to works. That's karma yoga. He has no will for any will to works. No, so you were saying that the bhakta does not reject. So he does reject sometimes. Okay, so he has no use for any will to works that is not turned to the direct worship of the beloved or the service of the temple. So any work that is connected with the love towards God, allowed. In the ashram, there are 20, 30 ladies who go in the evenings and arrange flowers and do malas and all that for the samadhi. That activity is allowed. If you want to do anything for the temple, collect funds or anything, allowed. In the bhakti yoga. Okay, so that's what he's saying. If you want to do puja, okay, or gather flowers for offering to the in front of your photos, allowed. But no other activity. The man of knowledge, self-confined by a deliberate choice to the force and activities of discriminative thought. The Jnana Yoga proceeds by discrimination, by viveka, discrimination. What is right and what is wrong? What is temporary and what is permanent? You go on saying to yourself, the body is not permanent, the vital is not permanent, the mind is not permanent. This is not me, this is not me. I am not the body, I am not the vital, I am not this. You go on saying this conceptively to yourself, it becomes a fact at some point when you repeatedly go on saying that. Okay, so not in words, but in your consciousness, in your thought, it must be. The man of knowledge, self-confined by deliberate choice to the force and activities of discriminative thought, finds release in the mind's hushed, inward drawn endeavor. So, hushed, silence. The funny part is that the Jnana Yoga is using the mind but silencing it. You are going through the mind but telling it to shut up. That's the funny part. Okay, he concentrates on the idea of the self. On the idea of the self. That means you try to imagine a calm, quiet, unmoving state. Then it becomes, your imagination is a very powerful tool. And if you go on imagining that, it becomes a reality.
Our mother says about the flower that it is useful, but it's a little dangerous.
Yeah, that's right. He concentrates on the idea of the self, succeeds by a subtle inner discernment in distinguishing its silent presence amid the wailing activities of nature. So, which are the wailing activities of nature? The body's movements and activities and actions, the vital's emotions, and the mind's thoughts. These are wailing. When there is movement, there is a wailing. It's very obvious because when you are doing this is a movement, left, right, left, right. So when your thoughts are going on moving, it becomes a wail. But you remove the movement of then there's a clear vision. Same thing with the vital also. Liking and disliking. Okay? Pleasure and pain. Success and failure. You are going on swinging between the two. So there is a movement in the vital. And that movement is the one that wails you. So to eliminate that movement, what do? You become equal to pleasure and pain. No moving. You are unaffected by that. So the movement stops. And if the movement stops, the wail is gone. So we come back to that famous birthday message to Satyendra. No?
Yes.
Yeah.
A
veil behind the heart,
a lid over the mind, keep us from the divine.
In the silence of the mind,
the lid love and devotion rend the veil.
Okay.
And in the silence of the mind, the lid thins and vanishes.
That's right. So he has given you the problem and the solution. So that's what he's saying here. So, He is indifferent. This is a Jnana Yogi. He is indifferent to the play of the emotions, deaf to the hunger call of passion. So when look at the word hunger call. Passion is a hunger. You need to satisfy it. The vital is very, very insistent on satisfying your desires. So he becomes deaf to it. He ignores his vital desires. Close to the activities of life. He reduces his physical activities also to a minimum. The more blessed he, the sooner they fall away from him and leave him free, still and mute, the eternal non-doer. There you are. So when you lose your identification with body-mind life and the consciousness rises out of the body-mind life and goes to the self, you are in a condition of utter calm and peace and you are not affected by anything. Then you realize that I was not doing anything. Nature is making me do everything. Nature is doing everything. It's handling me like a puppet. That's what you realize. The eternal non-doer. This body is a stumbling block. The vital functions are his enemies. If their demands can be reduced to a minimum, that is his great good fortune. The endless difficulties that arise from the environing world are dismissed by erecting firmly against them a defense of outer physical and inner spiritual solitude. Safe behind a wall of inner silence, he remains impassive and untouched by the world and by others. So we'll have a look at this because he has told you that he is the eternal non-doer. So who is the doer? Universal nature. And universal nature is making you act, putting emotions into your heart and putting thoughts into your mind. So the world is affecting you. Learn to not to be affected by the world. So that's what he's saying. The endless difficulties that arise from the environing world. The environing world, you can say nature, is putting thoughts into your mind. And these create difficulties. Emotions into your heart. Okay? It's even putting food into your body. There is an interaction with the universe and the individual at all the levels. Okay, so, and he has to, how does he do that? By erecting firmly against them a defense of outer physical and inner spiritual solitude. Outer physical, lock yourself up in a room, and if there's too much of traffic noise and all that, use earplugs. Okay, close your eyes. So this is the outer physical. And inner spiritual solitude, you must be able to develop your inner solitude to such an extent that even if you are on the battlefield, you are absolutely immune to all the action going on in the battlefield. So that's the inner solitude. Safe behind a wall of inner silence, he remains impassive and untouched by the world and by others. So the world is the impersonal universal nature and others. The others are part of universal nature, but you may have some feelings towards me, you may have good thoughts or you may have inimical thoughts also. So you have to keep all these things out. That's what he's saying. So he's including both. He's including the universe in which there are all sorts of forces and also by other persons, by others. To be alone with oneself or alone with the divine, to walk apart with God and his devotees, to entrench oneself in the single self-ward endeavor of the mind or Godward passion of the heart is a trend of these yogas. So, self-ward endeavor, going towards the self, going towards the Brahmic consciousness, or the Godward passion, all your emotions are turned towards God, nothing else, nobody else. Not other human beings, not other pets and animals or anything, everything only for God. Not easy. Okay, so the problem is solved by the excision, the cutting off of all but the one central difficulty which pursues the one chosen motive force. Your motive force may be knowledge, or your motive force may be bhakti. It may be devotion and love for the divine. Into the midst of the dividing calls of our nature, the principle of an exclusive concentration comes sovereignly to our rescue. This is in the ordinary paths of knowledge. But now he says, what about the integral yoga? So we come to the next para. In the integral yoga, you are not allowed to exclude anything because it has to be integral. So we read the para,
Yes.
and then we'll come back to it. But for the sadhaka of the integral yoga, this inner or this outer solitude can only be incidents or periods in his spiritual progress. Accepting life, he has to bear not only his own burden, but a great part of the world's burden too, along with it, as a continuation of his own sufficiently heavy load. Therefore, his yoga has much more of the nature of a battle than others. But this is not only an individual battle, it's a collective war waged over a considerable country. He has not only to conquer in himself the forces of egoistic falsehood and disorder, but to conquer them as representatives of the same adverse and inexhaustible forces in the world. Their representative character gives them a much more obstinate capacity of resistance and almost endless right to recurrence. Often he finds that even after he has won persistently his own personal battle, he has still to win it over and over again in a seemingly interminable war, because his inner existence has already been so much enlarged that not only it contains his own being with its well-defined needs and experiences, but is in solidarity with the being of others, because in himself he contains the universe. So he has to conquer the individual problems, but also to a certain extent the problems around him, because they'll be constantly coming into him. So he has to conquer those forces also.
So when Mother says the only change is the change of yourself.
Yes, that's right. If you want to change the world, change yourself. This sounds rather strange, and you wonder how you can change things outside when you change yourself. But what happens actually is that you are looking at certain things in a certain way, okay? And when you change yourself, your way of looking at those things and your attitude towards those things will change.
But how does that change the world?
It changes the world. That's a different thing altogether. So when they say that when this is said, you want to change the world, change yourself first, the problem is solved individually. But if you solve the problem at the universal level, you have to go to the supermind. There's no other way.
I think in Savitri he says, one man's perfection still can change the world.
Yes, because he has the power to do it.
Perfection.
Yeah. Perfection. So that completes this para also. It's a fairly simple one. So what Srimad is saying in the para is that you have to solve your own problems, but you have to also, the incoming forces, those also have to be controlled and changed to a certain extent. You allow some forces to come into you, you don't allow some forces to come into you. Because you are not isolating yourself physically and emotionally, you are not isolating yourself. You are letting everything come into you and change it. Transmute. He uses in Life Divine, transmute the lead into gold. So that's what you have to do. Okay? nor is the seeker of the integral fulfillment permitted to solve too arbitrarily even the conflict of his own inner members. He has to harmonize deliberate knowledge with unquestioning faith. He must conciliate the gentle soul of love with the formidable need of power. The passivity of the soul that lives content in transcendent calm has to be fused with the activity of the divine helper and the divine warrior. To him, as to all seekers of the Spirit, there are offered for solution the oppositions of the reason, the clinging hold of the senses, the perturbations of the heart, the ambush of the desires, the clog of the physical body. But he has to deal in another fashion with their mutual and internal conflicts and their hindrances to his aim, for he must arrive at an infinitely more difficult perfection in the handling of all this rebel matter, accepting them as instruments for the divine realization and manifestation. He has to convert their jangling discords, to enlighten their thick darknesses, to transfigure them separately and altogether, harmonizing them in themselves and with each other, integrally, omitting no grain or strand of vibration, leaving no iota of imperfection anywhere. An exclusive concentration or even a succession of concentrations of this kind can be, in his complex work, only a temporary convenience. It has to be abandoned as soon as its utility is over. An inclusive concentration is a difficult achievement towards which he must labor. So, Srimli is saying the method of the other yogas, where you reject everything and concentrate only on your mind or only on the heart, that is not allowed in the if you can do that if you want, but then you are not doing the integral yoga. If you want to do the integral yoga, learn to handle everything without rejecting.
But he does say it has to be abandoned as soon as its utility is over.
That's the concentration part, yeah.
Ah, okay.
That concentration has to be abandoned. You have to include everything. Temporarily, you are allowed to do that. Okay, that's what he's saying. We'll look at that. An exclusive, the last sentence. No, last but one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines from the bottom.
Right.
Okay. An exclusive concentration or even a succession of concentrations of that kind can be, in this complex work, only a temporary convenience. You are allowed to concentrate partly. Okay. But you are not allowed, ultimately that also has to be given up. For instance, okay, I find it quite, I mean not me, I'm saying, let us say, take a person may find it very easy to remember the divine when he is digging a pit, for instance, okay, or I am going on the scooter, mother is with me, I can understand. But if I am playing football, I find it difficult to think of mother. So temporarily you are allowed to suspend that activity. That's what he is saying. But ultimately, after you have developed the capacity to remember the divine in all your activities, do that also. That's what he's saying. Okay. Concentration is indeed the first condition of any yoga. But it's an all-receiving concentration that is the very heart of the integral yoga. A separate, strong fixing of the thought, of the emotions, or of the will on a single idea, object, state, inner movement, or principle is no doubt a frequent need here also. But this is only a subsidiary helpful process. A wide, massive opening, a harmonized concentration of the whole being in all its parts and through all its powers upon the One who is the All, is a larger action of this yoga without which it cannot achieve its purpose. For it is the consciousness that rests in the One and that acts in the All to which we aspire. It is this that we seek to impose on every element of our being and on every movement of our nature. This wide and concentrated totality is the essential character of the sadhana, and its character must determine its practice. So, he is making a one-pointed concentration and an all-inclusive concentration. In the integral yoga, it's an all-inclusive concentration that is there. It's a concentration, but it is wide. It includes all activities of life. That's what he's saying. Yeah. But even though the concentration of all the being on the divine is a character of the yoga, yet is our being too complex a thing to be taken up easily and at once, as if we were taking up the world in a pair of hands and set in its entirety to a single task. Man, in his effort at self-transcendence, has usually to seize on some one spring or some powerful leverage in the complicated machine that his nature is. This spring or lever he touches in preference to others and uses it to set the machine in motion towards the end that he has in view. This is what he has to do. Okay. I'll read the sentence again. Man, in his effort at self-transcendence, has usually to seize on some one spring or some powerful leverage in the complicated machine that his nature is. This spring or lever he touches in preference to others and uses it to set the machine in motion towards the end that he has in view. So he's saying you are allowed to concentrate on one thing temporarily. That's what he's saying. In his choice, it is always nature itself that should be his guide. But here it must be nature at her highest and widest in him, not at her lowest or in some limiting movement. In the lower vital activities, it is desire that nature takes as her most powerful leverage. But the distinct character of man is that he is a mental being, not a merely vital creature. As he can use his thinking mind and will to restrain and correct his life impulses, so too he can bring in the action of a still higher luminous mentality, aided by the deeper soul in him, the psychic being, and supersede by these greater and purer motive powers the domination of the vital and sensational force that we call desire. He can entirely master or persuade it and offer it up for transformation to its divine master. This higher mentality and his deeper soul, the psychic element in man, are the two grappling hooks by which the divine can lay hold upon his nature. So very interesting phrase he is using. There are two ways to do the integral yoga. One is to go to the self, above, vertically, and the other is to go horizontally into your psychic. These are the two best ways to do it. And he's saying they are like grappling hooks. A grappling hook is made of iron with maybe four
or at least 3 prongs. Yeah.
And then there's a rope attached to
right
at the back, and then you whirl it, throw it up on the wall, and once it is fixed, you climb up. So it's a grappling hook. So your self is a grappling hook or the psychic. These are the two methods that he suggests.
And then mother?
Mother says psychic, do that first. She insists on the psychic first. Srimda had the experience of the self first. Mother had the experience of the psychic at first. So we can stop today, I think. Yeah, 48. So now he is going to take up the higher mind and the deeper soul. So now in the next para, higher mind, and then afterwards he will discuss the psychic being. We leave this for next time.
Namaste, and thank you for attending. Thank you, Ranga.